Okay, so we're living in a world that is just full of opinions, right? Nonstop. But how do you actually tell what's a solid argument and what's just, well, noise? Today, we're going to give you the keys, a whole toolkit, really, for taking apart any argument you come across. So let's dive in.
I mean, think about it. We are just surrounded by arguments all day, every day. It's in the news, it's all over your social media feed, sometimes it's even right there at the dinner table. And they aren't always these big, loud debates. A lot of the time, it's this constant, subtle art of persuasion trying to get us to think or feel a certain way.
And that's the big challenge, isn't it? It's so easy to get pulled in by someone who sounds super confident or really passionate. But how do we actually look past all that? How do we get under the hood and test the foundation of an argument to see if it's, actually built to last? All right, to show you exactly how this works, we're going to take a look at a really powerful argument. But it's not from some long, complicated essay. Nope, it's from a single image with only 4 words. So our case study today is this political cartoon. Now, at first glance, it might look pretty simple, but let's start breaking down what we're actually seeing here to find the argument that's kind of hidden inside.
Okay, so let's just look at the pieces. First, you've got this figure who looks a whole lot like the Monopoly Man, right? The symbol of big money. And what's he doing? He's dancing on a freshly dug grave. The tombstone spells it out for us. R.I.P., the American middle class. And look, there's a shovel right there, which tells you this just happened.
So yeah, there are only 4 words on the screen, but there is a huge argument being made here. It's way more complex than just a simple RIP. So how do we unpack it? How do we do it systematically? Well, for that, we're going to need a special kind of toolkit. And luckily for us, that toolkit was designed by a philosopher. But he wasn't interested in dusty old academic arguments. He wanted to understand the kind of arguments we all run into in the real world every single day. And that philosopher was Toulmin. See, he had this realization that classical logic, the super formal stuff, it didn't really match up with how people actually argue in their jobs, at home, everywhere. So he decided to create a much more practical framework, one designed to dissect these real-world arguments. And here it is. This is the Toulmin model. It's got 6 parts, and each one has a really specific job. You can think of them as 6 key questions you can ask to figure out how any argument is put together. We've got the claim, grounds, warrant, backing, qualifier, and rebuttal. So let's take these tools and get to work on our cartoon. Okay, we're going to start with the first 3 pieces. These 3 really form the absolute core of any argument out there: the claim, the grounds, and the warrant. First up, the claim. This is super simple. It's just the main point the arguer is trying to get across. What's the bottom line? And in Matsson's cartoon, the claim is pretty blunt. It's that the super wealthy, personified by the Monopoly Man, have directly caused the death of the American middle class. Okay, so that's a pretty big claim, right? So the very next question has to be, what are the grounds? What's the proof? This is the evidence, the facts, the data that's being used to support that claim. And the cartoon itself doesn't have a spreadsheet on it, obviously, but it's tapping into some very real-world statistics that act as its grounds. The whole argument in this cartoon really leans on data that looks like this. The top 1% of Americans now control more than a third of the entire country's privately held wealth. I mean, that is a staggering concentration of money, and it serves as a key piece of evidence for the claim. And here's another piece of the puzzle for the grounds. The average net worth for just one household in that top 1% is over $16 million. This kind of data provides the factual bedrock for the cartoon's really dramatic statement. All right, now we get to the warrant. And honestly, this can be the trickiest part because it's almost always unstated. It's the logical leap, right? It's the underlying assumption that connects the evidence to the claim. For this cartoon, the warrant is the belief that this massive concentration of wealth at the top isn't just an accident. It's fundamentally unfair and creates a system where the middle class just can't survive. Okay, so now that we've mapped out the core of the argument, let's bring in the last 3 tools from our kit to really test its strength and see some of its nuances. So the backing, this is basically evidence for the warrant. It's support for that big, unstated assumption. So if the warrant is that the whole system is unfair, the backing would be evidence that shows those traditional markers of a middle-class life,
Owning a home, having a stable, good-paying job, being able to afford healthcare are all getting harder and harder for most people to achieve. Next up is the qualifier. And this one's all about how certain the argument is. How strong is the language? Well, the cartoon's imagery is totally absolute. You've got a tombstone, a dance on a grave. It's not saying the middle class is kinda in trouble. No, it's declaring it dead. And that confidence comes from the idea that the wealth gap is a well-established fact, something that very few economists or sociologists would even dispute.
And finally, we have the rebuttal. A really strong argument isn't afraid to acknowledge the other side. Now, the cartoon itself doesn't do this. It's a pretty one-sided statement. But using the Toulmin model forces us to think about it. What would a counter-argument even look like here? So, the cartoon's argument is that the wealthy have killed the middle class. But a potential rebuttal could argue the complete opposite, that the wealthy have earned their fortunes and are actually job creators who strengthen the middle class. Seeing both sides like this is so key to a full analysis. So let's just step back and look at what we did here. We took a simple image with just 4 words, and we turned it into a completely structured argument. We found its evidence, we uncovered its hidden assumptions, and we even considered the counterpoints. And that is the real power of this model. This isn't about winning or losing an argument. It's about understanding its architecture. It gives you a roadmap to see the claim, to check the evidence, and maybe most importantly, to question those hidden assumptions, those warrants, because that's where so many arguments either stand up strong or just completely fall apart. And the best part is, you can use this framework for literally anything. A news article you're reading, a debate you see online, even an ad that's trying to sell you something. So the real question is, now that you have the toolkit, what argument are you going to dissect next?